Hello everyone. This is a story I'm very excited to tell, and I'm surprised I'm able to tell it. Beedrill has been a horrible Pokemon almost its entire existence, in every level of play and every format. Its base form has a whopping 395 base stat total, which, when paired with the offensively poor poison and bug typing and mediocre abilities like Swarm and Sniper, made it bad enough that Beedrill really doesn't have a competitive history at all until Generation 6. Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire brought a new wave of Mega Evolutions, and Mega Beedrill was one of them, and the buffs it got were insane. Most Megas get exactly 100 additional stat points, and Beedrill is technically no exception. Its 395 base stat total went up to 495, but this is because they cut 30 special attack, which is completely useless for Beedrill, effectively giving it a stat boost of 130 useful points. They gave it a 70-point buff to speed and a 60-point buff to attack, while also giving it the incredible offensive ability Adaptability, making its stab moves 2 times instead of the usual 1.5 times boost. On pretty much any other physical attacker, this ability and stat buff would be completely broken, but not on Beedrill. 150 attack with Adaptability sounds like a lot, but both of its stabs are bad against Steel and Poison, arguably the top 2 defensive types in the game. And of course, it's still extremely frail. They didn't fix that at all. Its Mega form was way better than the base form, but it wasn't enough to make it great. Mega Beedrill really struggled in doubles formats like VGC, and it continues to struggle in Pokemon Champions. The biggest issue Beedrill faces in doubles is that it takes up a Mega slot. Unlike singles formats that have usage-based tiers and ban certain powerful Pokemon, VGC rule sets typically allow all non-legendaries, so in earlier generations, Mega Beedrill was competing with Mega evolutions like Mega Gengar, Mega Kangaskhan, Mega Salamence. It's not hard to see why Beedrill wasn't at the top of anyone's list. And with Champions adding even more Mega evolutions with more on the way, the competition will only increase. The benefits of having Mega Beedrill on your team don't come close to justifying the opportunity cost. Furthermore, Mega Beedrill's main strength is powerful pivoting with U-turn, which is a lot more effective and safe in singles when there's only one opposing Pokemon to worry about. So you'd think it would be good in singles then, right? Well, kind of. It was certainly better. If there's ever a place where Beedrill can be great, it is in singles. The main governing body of competitive singles, Smogon, sorts Pokemon into tiers based on usage, with overused at the top, then underused, rarely used, never used, PU, and finally zero used. There's also Ubers, a ban list format where a lot of legendaries and other broken Pokemon go. In Generation 6, Mega Beedrill was a top tier in the underused format, doing what you'd expect, mostly U-turn pivoting, Poison Jab to take advantage of its other stab, and Knock Off or Drill Run with Protect as a last move, since in Generation 6 you needed a turn for Megas to get their new speed stat. Some even considered it viable in overused, but it was a very rare sight. Mega Beedrill was slightly worse in Generation 7. It wasn't nerfed in any way. In fact, Megas now getting their speed stat on the turn they Mega Evolve was a nice buff for Beedrill, freeing up a slot so it didn't have to use Protect. But power creep marched on, more than ever in Generation 7. Z-moves and powerful new Pokemon like Magearna and Ash Greninja raised the standard for what is and isn't viable even higher. With so many insanely powerful Pokemon, how can you justify using Beedrill? It was still quite good in Gen 7 underused, but it was almost universally considered unviable in overused, the main format. Despite this, I actually tried building Mega Beedrill back in Generation 7, but I wasn't nearly as strong of a builder or battler as I am today. So, like everyone else, I failed to make it work, and the generation passed by without a single top-level Mega Beedrill team in overused. More recently though, I decided to try again, but not in Generation 7. I wanted to use Mega Beedrill in the most active, competitive, and challenging format possible. Since Mega Evolutions aren't in Generation 9 and Pokemon Champions doesn't support 6v6 singles, the best place was National Dex. When Sword and Shield cut Pokemon from the game for the first time, the National Dex tier was created, and it has become a massively popular format. Any Pokemon that has ever existed is here. Generation 9 National Dex is an absolute blast to play, but it is probably the most severely power-crept metagame ever. You've got cores like Mega Charizard Y plus Dragonium Z Raging Bolt, Tapu Koko plus Iron Valiant, and insane removal like Terapagos supporting Quiver Dance Volcarona. The power level is off the charts, and there are more options than ever. To give you an idea of how strong this tier is, in Generation 6, where Mega Beedrill was first introduced, Hoopa Unbound, Mega Mawile, and Aegislash were banned to Ubers. In National Dex Overused, none of these Pokemon even get enough usage to stay in Overused. And, like the regular singles formats, National Dex does have different tiers, although not as many. It has Overused, Underused, Rarely Used, and the Ban List Ubers. And guess where Mega Beedrill is? That's right. Rarely Used. And National Dex Rarely Used isn't even a playable ladder, so if you want to use Mega Beedrill, the lowest tier you can use it is in Underused. And the Smogon website, which provides many sets and metagame overviews, has a suggested set for Mega Beedrill in the National Dex Underused tier. The set is titled, "Please Don't Use Mega Beedrill." The first sentence of the write-up states, "It is completely unviable." The entire paragraph is basically begging the reader not to use Mega Beedrill and explaining why all of its seemingly useful tools aren't nearly enough to make it worthwhile. But I wasn't trying to use Mega Beedrill in National Dex Underused. I was trying to use it in National Dex Overused, a much more powerful tier. And my goal wasn't just to win a few games or get a couple of highlight reels where Mega Beedrill did well. I wanted to prove that this Pokemon was viable, build a Mega Beedrill team that could consistently perform well at a top level. It had a lot of traits that I found very valuable, being faster than any non-choice Scarfer in the metagame, the incredibly powerful pivoting with U-turn, being able to absorb Toxic Spikes since it's a grounded poison, and a fairly useful defensive type, resisting Fairy and 4 times resisting Fighting and Grass. I figured it was probably unviable, but a small part of me believed in Mega Beedrill. My first attempt was live streamed in May of 2025, and as you would expect, nobody believed it would work. Almost every message in the chat was talking about how bad Beedrill was, posting calcs showing how frail it was, and generally saying it was unviable. But I got to the building anyway. The first thing was deciding on a set for Mega Beedrill. I actually didn't need to EV invest fully in speed. Beedrill outspeeds the fastest Pokemon in the metagame, Zamazenta, with a Jolly Nature and 200 EVs. This allowed me to put 56 EVs in defense, which lets Beedrill live a lot of attacks it would otherwise be one-hit KO'd by. As for moves, U-turn is of course a given. It's what you'll be clicking probably 75% of the time. Poison Jab is also mandatory. You need to take advantage of adaptability, and sadly Beedrill doesn't get Gunk Shot, so Poison Jab it is. I picked Knockoff for the next slot. This allows Mega Beedrill to at least get some value in every matchup. If you face a Pokemon like Toxapex, Corviknight, Zapdos, or Moltres that you can't really effectively touch, at least you can remove its item. For the last slot, there are a lot of options people use. Drill Run for ground coverage, Fell Stinger if you're greedy, Pursuit to trap unsuspecting targets, some even go for Swords Dance in the delusional hope of sweeping with Mega Beedrill. I think all of these options are bad. I went with a choice almost nobody was using, Toxic Spikes. National Dex Overused has only 3 poison types in the tier, Galarian Slowking, Toxapex, and Clodsire, and they're all below 10% usage, so in a lot of games, your opponent won't have a poison type to absorb Toxic Spikes on entry. If they have a lot of grounded Pokemon but no grounded poison type, Toxic Spikes becomes one of the best moves in the game. It also gives Mega Beedrill another move to click when it can't do much damage. Suppose you suspect Moltres will enter the field. U-turn barely does anything and you risk being burned by Flame Body when you make contact, so why not use Toxic Spikes instead? Even if your opponent does have a poison type like Toxapex, Beedrill can U-turn on it and bring in something that destroys poison types. Something like Tapu Lele. Tapu Lele is the Pokemon I decided was probably Mega Beedrill's strongest possible partner. Not only does it work well with the Toxic Spike strategy, when Mega Beedrill clicks U-turn on other physical walls like Landorus, Great Tusk, or Alomomola, Tapu Lele can enter. Although Tapu Lele and Mega Beedrill do both hate steel types, I figured that maybe a Fightinium Z Focus Blast Tapu Lele could help with that. It's also just an incredible stall breaker. Mega Beedrill is completely useless against stall, so our Breaking Court needed serious power, which Tapu Lele provides. On top of that, its Psychic Terrain helps Beedrill avoid priority, which it otherwise really struggles with. With base 65 HP and base 40 defense, even weak priority moves deal massive damage to Mega Beedrill, and stronger ones kill it outright. So I was pretty confident that if there was a great Mega Beedrill team out there, it involved Tapu Lele. There's a ton of synergy between these two Pokemon. The next Pokemon I was most confident in was Alomomola. This is the most used Pokemon in National Dex High Ladder, and for good reason. It's a fantastic Wish Passer with 165 base HP, but what really makes it great for Mega Beedrill is the combination of Flip Turn and Regenerator. Beedrill is extremely frail and really struggles to enter the field. It can hardly ever just switch in, since even defensive Pokemon can often threaten to one-hit KO it. Alomomola is very slow, so it can tank a hit, use Flip Turn and pivot out to Beedrill while healing itself with Regenerator. This gets Beedrill on the field safely, so it can use U-turn, deal tons of damage, and then pivot into something that's good against whatever's on the field, or even go back into Alomomola and keep the cycle going. The synergy here is incredible. If Beedrill has any shot at working, it's going to be with a slow pivot, and Alomomola is by far the best in the format. The last Pokemon that I was very confident would work well with Mega Beedrill is Terrapagos. Terastallization is banned in National Dex, so Terrapagos can't access its stellar form, but the regular Terrastall form is still amazing. It's incredible at removing hazards, as it can hit every ghost type in the metagame for super effective damage, and its ability Terra Shell makes everything that hits it, when at full health, not very effective. So with heavy-duty boots to block hazard damage and preserve Terra Shell, Terrapagos is the perfect removal Pokemon. Beedrill is extremely weak to Stealth Rock, and it doesn't like spikes either, so any good team with Mega Beedrill must have really solid hazard control. Terrapagos also threatens massive damage to Gliscor with Ice Beam. Gliscor is arguably the #1 enemy of Mega Beedrill. Unlike other walls that slowly get chipped by U-turn, Gliscor resists every hit Beedrill can throw out, and instantly heals it off with Poison Heal. It also doesn't care about its Toxicor being knocked off once it's poisoned. So having Terrapagos to threaten Gliscor with Ice Beam is definitely nice. Those were the big three, the Pokemon I was most confident Beedrill needed to work. The next thing I needed to consider was what archetype Beedrill should be placed on. The archetype of a team is basically just a description of how it operates and tries to win. The most simple way you can identify this is by observing how many offensive and defensive Pokemon there are on the team. The main archetypes in competitive singles are Stall, Semi-Stall, Balance, Offense, and Hyper Offense. Stall is made up of 6 defensive Pokemon, so that's definitely not the right fit for Mega Beedrill. Semi-Stall is more feasible. These teams have 4 to 5 defensive Pokemon, and the 1 or 2 offensive Pokemon they choose are often quite fast, to give some speed to an otherwise extremely slow team. But I didn't think Semi-Stall was a good fit for Mega Beedrill either. Because you're only using 1 or 2 offensive Pokemon, you really want those offensive Pokemon to be consistent. And as I said, Beedrill is definitely not consistent. You'll have some games where it looks amazing, spams U-turn, and ruins an entire team. Most games, though, you'll see something like a Moltres, Zapdos, Gliscor, Corviknight, Defensive Gholdengo, or Toxapex, all of which single-handedly completely shut down any chance of your Beedrill doing significant damage. Hyper Offense also isn't the answer. It may seem like Mega Beedrill is the perfect embodiment of Hyper Offense, with its insane attack and speed and horrible defenses, but in reality, Hyper Offense is the absolute last place Beedrill wants to be. And not just because its best partners like Alomomola and Tapu Lele don't often fit on Hyper Offense. The big reason is that Beedrill's main strength is pivoting, and every time you click U-turn, you have to ask yourself, what am I going to U-turn into? Hyper Offense teams have no defensive Pokemon at all, so every time Beedrill outspeeds something and clicks U-turn, you're probably about to sacrifice something on your team to eat the hit. Like all pivots, Beedrill definitely needs a defensive core to effectively work. That leaves Balance and Offense as the possibilities. Both of these archetypes have a mix of offensive and defensive Pokemon, so theoretically Beedrill could fit on either one. I decided to try out Balance first though, as I thought a slower paced team would give Beedrill more chances to enter and get value out of U-turn throughout the longer game. Balance is also a generally good archetype for Pokemon like Tapu Lele, Alomomola, and Terrapagos, so it seemed like a good place to start. So I started with those 4, Mega Beedrill, Tapu Lele, Alomomola, and Terrapagos. After struggling for a while with the team's defensive core, I eventually settled on Ferrothorn and Landorus for the last 2 members. Ferrothorn was a solid defensive steel type that gave my team Stealth Rock, and it has a lot of synergy with Alomomola. They cover each other's weaknesses very well. Landorus gave the team an electric immunity and a ground immunity, and the double removal with both Defog Landorus and Rapid Spin Terrapagos was nice with how much Beedrill hates hazards. I was worried about the Mega Charizard Y matchup though, so I decided on a Choice Scarf Stone Edge set for Landorus and an Assault Vest Alomomola. I really didn't want to use the Assault Vest, but without it, Alomomola gets destroyed by Charizard's Solar Beam. Using the Assault Vest means my Alomomola can't wish and pass healing to other teammates. Terapagos really appreciates wish support since it restores Terra Shell, and wish gives Tapu Lele a lot of added longevity against bulkier teams. But losing every time I saw a Mega Charizard Y really wasn't an option. It's the most used Mega in the tier. So my final team was Toxic Spikes Mega Beedrill, Calm Mind Phytinium Z Tapu Lele, Assault Vest Alomomola, Heavy Duty Boots Terapagos, Choice Scarf Landorus, and Physically Defensive Ferrothorn. I didn't manage to fit in everything on my wish list, pun intended, but still the team seemed strong and had a lot of promising traits. I ended up getting in 5 games on stream, and the team performed quite well, going 4-1. Everything seemed to go as I theorized. I was getting a ton of value out of Toxic Spikes, Alomomola was flip turning to help Beedrill enter safely, and I was actually getting a lot of real value out of Beedrill. And my elo was in the 1700s for this stream, near top 100 on the ladder, so it wasn't just farming awful opponents either. The stream attendees were shocked it went well, and honestly, so was I. I was energized by the results and excited to try Mega Beedrill again. Still, while the team performed well, it definitely wasn't flawless. Moltres was a really bad matchup, and the Scarf Landorus felt nearly useless in many games, a real underperformer. The initial results were promising, but I knew this wasn't quite the right team yet. 2 weeks later, I streamed with Mega Beedrill again and tried to push the team even further. I made some adjustments to help with the issues I experienced last time. I wanted to get rid of Landorus, but I couldn't find a way to do that without also getting rid of Terapagos. I needed some ground immunity after all, and despite its good performance in the last stream, Terapagos was the most expendable team member. So with a heavy heart, I switched Terapagos and Landorus for Zapdos and Great Tusk. The Great Tusk had Head Smash and was EV to get a Photosynthesis speed boost in Sun. This maintained the strong matchup into Mega Charizard Y, much like the Choice Scarf Stone Edge Landorus before it, and it was nice for Moltres as well. So I tried out this new and hopefully improved team, and it did not do too well. I played 6 games and lost half of them, and this was in the 1600s on the ladder. A truly terrible performance. The supposedly improved team was so bad that I scrapped it and tried new approaches. I tried a Tornadus-Therian version, a version with Raging Bolt and Melmetal. I even tried replacing Alomomola with Teleport Slowbro. But all of these versions just ended up worse. At the end of the stream, I just went back to the original that I built in the first stream, the only change being that Tapu Lele was now Psychium Z with Future Sight, so it would have a better way of hitting Moltres. The stream was basically a disaster. Beedrill itself performed quite poorly, all alternate versions failed and ended up just as a worse version of the original, and nothing really got fixed. The Psychium Z on Tapu Lele was a small change and only slightly improved the team. A lot of the previous issues were still major problems. I wondered if the first stream was just a fluke. After all, 5 games is a small sample size. Maybe everyone is right, and Mega Beedrill truly just isn't worth using. Despite the disastrous second attempt at Beedrill, I still thought there was maybe a chance it was viable. But I knew most people watching my channel didn't want to see me stream Beedrill over and over and over again, so I decided to take this project up on my own time. In August of 2025, I finally had some promising results. I found a very unique Pokemon to help the team out. Zygarde 10%, aka Zydog. I used a Choice Band set and placed it over Tapu Lele as the primary breaker of the team. It definitely hurt to lose Tapu Lele, but Zydog actually synergized so well with Beedrill that the team performed much better. Zydog's signature move 1000 Arrows is a ground-type attack that hits flying types and smacks them down. Notably, it hits Gliscor, Corviknight, Moltres, and Zapdos, all of which Mega Beedrill absolutely hates. 1000 Arrows doesn't hit Corviknight, Zapdos, or Moltres super effectively right away, but after they're smacked down, it does hit for super effective damage. Now, of course, my opponent won't just leave in their birds to die, especially not when there's a Mega Beedrill on my team, but that's not the point. This is something a lot of people get wrong when team building with inconsistent Pokemon, and as we've established, Mega Beedrill is extremely inconsistent. But you can't force it to be consistent, it simply gets hardwalled by too many Pokemon. Sure, you could try running a bad Pokemon like Magnezone that takes care of Corviknight and Mega Scizor, but it doesn't help with the Zapdos and Moltres. Maybe then you add a Serperior with Hidden Power Rock, something to lure those birds. But this just isn't a good approach. Not only does this strategy force you to use subpar Pokemon, and the whole plan fails if your opponent knows you're set, but even then, there are other Pokemon to stop Mega Beedrill, like Gliscor and Pecharunt. Trying to make Mega Beedrill consistent is a fool's errand. You shouldn't try to build a team that makes Mega Beedrill always perform well. You should try to build a team that has Pokemon that perform well against the type of teams that Mega Beedrill hates, so the team as a whole can be consistent even when Mega Beedrill doesn't perform well in any particular game. This is what made Zydog such a good partner. Most of Beedrill's worst enemies were flying types that hate Zydog, and the opponent is probably counting on that flying type as their ground immunity, so it's likely their entire team hates Zydog. But this wasn't the only benefit to adding the dog. Because it's a ground and dragon type, it can switch in on Mega Charizard Y at least once. And it outspeeds Charizard even with an adamant nature, and it threatens massive damage with 1,000 arrows or a one-hit KO with Outrage. This made my team solid enough against Charizard Y that I didn't have to use the Assault Vest on Alomomola anymore. I could use Wish, which was great news for Terapagos and a lot of other team members. Zydog being there for Charizard also made me more comfortable changing the Landorus set, so I swapped the Choice Scarf for a Flyinium Z Stealth Rocker set, which performed a lot better. This team performed well, reaching high 1800s and nearly achieving top 10 on the ladder. I felt like my goal was close, but unfortunately it was once again not to be. In removing Tapu Lele, I forgot one of the big reasons I added it in the first place: breaking Stall. When I removed Tapu Lele, I destroyed my Breaking Core. As powerful as Zydog is, it has no shot at breaking a Stall team, and the rest of the team didn't really have any powerful breakers either. Even some balanced teams managed to wall me out. The team just didn't have the power it needed to work. This was the last straw for me. I'd sunk too much time into trying to make Mega Beedrill work, and I figured it was probably unviable like everyone had been telling me for months. So I dropped the project and spent my spare time on other things. Until April of 2026. A bout of optimism, or perhaps delusion, made me think it was time to give Mega Beedrill another go. I started with the Psychium Z Tapu Lele version of the team I had built my very first stream, which was, despite months of effort, still the closest I'd come to making Mega Beedrill truly work well. But I made one small change that made a huge difference. I took the Choice Scarf off of Landorus and made it a defensive set with Stealth Rock. This performed way better than the Choice Scarf set, and it allowed my Ferrothorn to run Spikes, giving me more entry hazards. I was still using Assault Vest Alomomola, and I figured that was sufficient to handle Charizard Y when paired with good playing and offensive pressure. The old version of the team had Choice Scarf Stone Edge Landorus because of how afraid I was of Charizard, but my fear was largely unfounded. Yes, it's a threat, but the matchup is certainly playable without Choice Scarf Stone Edge Landorus. This completely transformed the team. It's funny how one small set change that I could have made when I originally built the team almost a year ago would have been such a big deal. But better late than never. Things were going smoothly, this team was cruising along, consistently winning, and it got me to the mid-1800s on the ladder. But then I had a battle that changed everything. It was against a Stall team. I started the game confident. After all, I had a Calm Mind Psychium Z Tapu Lele, basically the worst news ever for Stall, and I positioned it perfectly. I baited Mega Sableye to switch in to Magic Bounce Ferrothorn's entry hazards, then brought in Tapu Lele. Fearing a Choice Spec set, my opponent used Protect, giving me a free Calm Mind. Everything was going according to plan. I managed to KO Dondozo before I was scared out by Chansey. I wanted to reset terrain before I took on that monster. I entered again on Mega Sableye shortly after, calm-minded, 2-hit KO'd Chansey, and with some crazy reads, I got a kill on Gliscor as well. 3 Pokemon down to Tapu Lele. You'd think the game was over, but it was at this moment I realized that literally my entire team other than Tapu Lele loses to Mega Sableye. Defensive Landorus' Earthquake does almost nothing to Sableye, same with Ferrothorn's Power Whip, and same with Alomomola's Flip Turn, and they're all vulnerable to burn. Mega Beedrill's U-Turn does around 40 to defensive Sableye, which isn't bad, but because Mega Sableye is so incredibly slow, it underspeeds even minimum speed Alomola. So I can't slow Flip Turn and get Beedrill in safely. Slowly and painfully, I lost the game. My team was helpless. I had played Tapu Lele perfectly, but it wasn't enough. My opponent suggested that I may just have to accept the bad matchup with my team. I disagreed. I knew what would save this team: a Pursuit Trapper. Although this move was removed after Generation 7, National Dex not only includes all Pokemon that have ever been in a game, but also all moves. Pursuit is a physical 40 base power dark move, but it doubles in power if the opponent switches out, and hits before they switch. Thus, Pokemon that use this move are often called Pursuit Trappers, because there's no way to get out of being hit. Paired with a Pursuit Trapper like Kingambit, Tapu Lele wouldn't have to let itself be poisoned by Chansey like it was in that game. It could switch out and let the Chansey be worn down by Pursuit until it's in range of Psyshock, which would only take 1 or 2 Pursuits. Really, any strong special attacker paired with a strong Pursuit Trapper is an incredibly powerful Breaking Core. If well played, it defeats any stall team. The problem was that I couldn't see a way to fit Kingambit onto the team. I obviously can't get rid of Beedrill, that's the only fast Pokemon on the team, not to mention the entire point of my efforts. I can't remove Tapu Lele, that's the whole reason I'm trying to add Kingambit in the first place, it works well with Tapu Lele. If I replace Landorus, the whole team gets destroyed by ground types. If I replace Alomomola, we lose to fire types, and we lose a crucial pivot. If I remove Terapagos, there goes my removal. I could go Defog on Landorus, but that's not nearly good enough removal for a Mega Beedrill team. Ferrothorn was the most replaceable by far, and it almost seemed like it could work, until I realized one big problem. Ogerpon Wellspring. This menace gets Water Absorb, making it the ultimate enemy of Assault Vest Alomomola. It completely shuts Alomomola down, blocking Flip Turn while healing. If you run an Assault Vest Alomomola, you need a good switch into Ogerpon Wellspring. If you don't have one, you're asking to lose every time you see it, and Wellspring is a high usage Pokemon. Now, Kingambit can take a couple of Ivy Cudgels if you run a bulky set, so I figured maybe it would be okay to have a slightly challenging Wellspring matchup if I run a physically defensive non-Assault Vest Alomomola, one that can survive a Power Whip and use Toxic against Wellspring. But if I do this, then my team gets destroyed by Mega Charizard Y. I have absolutely no switch in. Every possible solution I could think of, either Mega Charizard Y or Ogerpon Wellspring ruined. There seemed like no way to improve the team. I certainly wasn't going to just accept a bad stall matchup, but without drastic changes, it seemed like I was doomed to either have a bad stall matchup or straight up lose to some extremely common Pokemon, and none of those options were acceptable. So I scrapped it and started completely fresh, with a totally new approach. An offense team this time, not balance. I was going to use the famous Volt Turn strategy. The idea is pretty simple. Beedrill uses U-turn to pivot out, often bringing in flying types or Pokemon that are more physically defensive than specially defensive. Using that U-turn, I pivot into a Volt Switch Pokemon like Tapu Koko, which is strong against flying types and Pokemon with a worse special defense stat. I click Volt Switch, at which point the opponent probably brings in a special wall with worse physical defense, something that Beedrill can U-turn on, and the cycle continues. This is a very idealized explanation, of course. Ground types block Volt Switch, and U-turners are vulnerable to all kinds of contact effects that can interfere with this cycle, but you get the general idea. I used the same Mega Beedrill set, Assault Vest Alomomola like so many times before, Choice Specs Tapu Koko, Kingambit for a powerful Pursuit Trapper to shut down those special walls, Iron Treads for Stealth Rock and Rapid Spin, and Zapdos for a physically defensive wall and ground immunity. Also another Volt Switcher for the Volt Turn core. With Choice Specs Tapu Koko as a strong special attacker and Kingambit as a Pursuit Trapper, I finally had a Breaking Core that I knew would work. I did have other concerns though. Gliscor seemed like a major threat to me when I was building. After all, it shuts down Mega Beedrill and it's immune to Volt Switch, making it the ultimate enemy of this strategy. Having Hidden Power Ice on Tapu Koko and Zapdos, as well as Ice Spinner on Treads, seemed probably sufficient to me, but only testing would tell. I got on the ladder, and to my surprise, the team immediately worked very well. I shot up to the 1900s almost instantly, reaching top ladder in just about a dozen games, and the first stall team I faced I absolutely crushed. The Breaking Core worked perfectly. There was one problem though. Prince 5. Prince 5 is one of those players that's been using the same team on the ladder for months or maybe years, and most of the team isn't too threatening, but there is a Dragon Dance Mega Charizard X that's very scary. My only fire resist is Alomomola, which is Dragon Dance setup fodder. Fortunately, Mega Charizard X is not a very common Mega, at around 4% usage, and my team can usually handle it. I can attack it as it sets up, force it to chip itself with Flare Blitz, and finish it off with a Kingambit Sucker Punch, so it's normally not a huge problem. But the plan relies on Kingambit Sucker Punch. So if the Charizard has Roost, that's probably game over. There's basically nothing I can do. especially with so much of my team being setup fodder. Charizard can set up on Iron Treads, Alomomola, Zapdos, Tapu Koko, and even Kingambit if there aren't too many fallen members on my side. Beedrill is the only Pokemon that can do significant damage, and even it loses 1v1. So if I face a Roost Dragon Dance Mega Charizard X, it's over. I considered Swords Dance Kingambit to punish this set. I thought I can boost up on a weakened Charizard using Roost, then KO it or deal a ton of damage with Sucker Punch next turn, enough for Alamola's Aqua Jet to finish it off. But my team is also weak to opposing Kingambit, so I need Low Kick on my own Kingambit. I can't drop Pursuit because then my Breaking Core is destroyed, and I certainly can't drop Knockoff or Sucker Punch. Those are Kingambit's best moves. There seemed like no real solution. I just had to take the L against Roost Mega Charizard X. With its low usage and only about a quarter of them actually using Roost, I calculated that on average I should face a Roost Dragon Dance Mega Charizard X even less than 1 in every 100 games. I figured that making a flawless team was impossible. I had to swallow my pride and accept this bad matchup. And it paid off. With the exception of the instant loss matchups to Prince 5, I was winning over and over. On April 28, 2026, I finally hit rank 1 on the National Dex Overused ladder with Mega Beedrill. To my knowledge, this is the highest level of competitive success Mega Beedrill has ever achieved. And you'd think this is where the story ends, but something wasn't sitting right with me. First of all, it still bothered me that this team had an instant loss matchup to Roost Dragon Dance Charizard X, even if it was rare. Secondly, Gliscor was still a major threat. Sure, I had 3 ice attacks on the team, but none of them one-hit KO Gliscor. And with Protect and Poison Heal, if a Gliscor is alive, it's alive and well. Also, Mega Beedrill just wasn't doing nearly as much on this team as it had in the past. I theorized earlier that Mega Beedrill would work better on balance than offense, because the slower pace would give it more time to enter and pivot around with U-turn, and it seemed like this theory was correct. On this team, Beedrill would sometimes go the entire game without entering the field. It just felt like the team didn't need Mega Beedrill. It had Tapu Koko for speed, it had Zapdos for a fighting resist, and with a Steel-type Rapid Spinner, the team didn't badly need a Toxic Spike Absorber either. I felt like some random top-tier Pokemon instead of Beedrill may very well be an improvement to the team. But even beyond that, something about the team just didn't feel quite right. Normally when I hit rank 1 with a team, I feel invincible. I feel like this team is so solid that almost nothing could make me lose. But a lot of the games I played leading up to rank 1 were very close calls, and my opponents made some mistakes. I felt like I hit rank 1 not because the team was great, but because I was playing well, or my opponents weren't playing well. And for some this might be an even greater achievement, but my goal here wasn't to show off, oh, I'm a great player because I got to the top with a bad Pokemon. I wanted to make a team that proved Mega Beedrill wasn't a bad Pokemon, a team that didn't need good predictions or opponents' misplays to win. So I took this rank 1 Mega Beedrill team, and I scrapped it. I stared again at my previous team of 6, the same 6 that I'd built a year ago. I looked again if there was some way to fit Kingambit in, to make that team beat Stall. And suddenly it hit me like a bolt of lightning. The answer was Raging Bolt. If I replaced Tapu Lele with Raging Bolt, that provided a decent switch into Mega Charizard Y and Ogerpon Wellspring. This would allow me to change Alomomola to a Wish set, although I would still run a specially defensive set for Charizard Y. And with the team having Raging Bolt as an Ogerpon Wellspring switch in, I could switch out Ferrothorn for Kingambit. I decided on a choice spec set for Raging Bolt. This gave me an incredibly powerful special breaker and a Pursuit Trapper to go with it, creating a solid breaking core, and it covered all of my defensive weaknesses. It also synergized very well with Mega Beedrill, creating the Volt Turn core I explained earlier. It also followed that same principle as Zydog. Raging Bolt absolutely loves to see the kind of teams that Mega Beedrill hates to see. Choice Spec's Raging Bolt loves Corviknight, it loves Moltres, it loves Zapdos. These are all free entry opportunities for it to fire off a powerful attack. And with Specs Draco Meteor having a good chance to one-hit KO specially defensive Gliscor, Volt Switch to chip special walls like Chansey, and Pursuit to wear down Pokemon like Clodsire and other special walls, I knew no Stall team was getting past this core. Wish Alomomola also helped out a ton. It was great being able to run that. Terapagos in particular loves being able to restore a Terra Shell, and it gave the entire team a whole new level of longevity. When I put these 6 together, I felt like I had cracked the code. And I was right. On May 6th, 2026, I hit rank 1 with Beedrill for the second time, and this time it felt right. I didn't just stop at rank 1 though, I pushed my elo further and further, eventually hitting a peak elo of 2026. And on my run to that elo, I ran into Prince 5. But this time I had an answer to Charizard, and I 6-0'd them. It felt great to do that after being their personal free elo ATM machine for the last month. Along the run, I also made some smaller adjustments to the team, giving Terapagos Earth Power over Flamethrower, as Pecharunt became a more popular spin blocker. Also made Terapagos modest, so Ice Beam would one-hit KO specially defensive Gliscor, and I invested more speed into Landorus so it could outpace Raging Bolt. The team performed incredibly well, and what's more, it needed Beedrill. It needed a fast Pokemon. It appreciated a pivot. It needed a Toxic Spike Absorber. It needed an emergency Fairy Resist if the opponent had a Choice Specs Tapu Lele. Beedrill wasn't just on the team because I liked it. It was actually the best Pokemon for that team slot. I ended up staying at or near the top of the National Dex ladder for 2 whole weeks, proving this team's dominance and consistency, and throughout the entire time, I never once switched teams. Eventually, I decided to stop laddering and just let myself decay, but it was an amazing run. Sometimes great teams are built quickly, but often the building process looks more like this. Lots of different versions, lots of battling on the ladder, and phases of disappointment and hopelessness, as well as inspiration and joy. The final team was Toxic Spikes Mega Beedrill, Choice Specs Raging Bolt, Specially Defensive Leftovers Alomomola, Heavy Duty Boots Terapagos, Defensive Leftovers Landorus, and Black Glasses Pursuit Kingambit. If you want to try this team out for yourself, the importable is in the description. The importable for all other versions are there as well, if you want to try those. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing and leaving a like. It helps out a lot. I do a lot of guide videos on this channel, as well as competitive analyses and occasionally team building stories like this, so if any of that sounds good to you, maybe hit the bell so you don't miss future uploads. Let me know in the comments what your favorite underrated Pokemon is, and also let me know if you have any team building ideas you think might have potential. If you have any questions about how to play this team, or any questions about the building process, feel free to leave those in the comments as well, and I will do my best to answer them all. Also, what did you think about the level of detail in this video? I didn't want to bore you with every single EV adjustment I made throughout this entire team building process, but I also didn't want to breeze over significant developments. Let me know what you think. Was this level of detail good? Do you want more or less? Either way, thank you for listening, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.